The Dendro element themed around nature is certainly one of Genshin Impact's biggest mysteries. The game heavily revolves around the use of the elements both in and out of combat, so it's pretty interesting that this 7th element is barely implemented into the current version. So I figured I would throw out some ideas and predictions to contribute to the ongoing discussion. There have been some great videos recently about this topic which I recommend watching, but I think my ideas are unique enough to warrant me making my own video. I will be discussing multiple aspects of the element's possible implementation, including its theme, character mechanics, elemental resonance, and its elemental reactions. Just a disclaimer, I will not be referencing any leaked information because we really don't know what's credible or not, and everything is always subject to change. However, that does not mean that my predictions are baseless. As a matter of fact, the main source of my ideas is a convincing pattern that I don't think I've seen anyone talk much about. And it might just be the best hint we have about Dendro that isn't based on a leak. That thing is the existence of the element using Samaturals. Okay, now I know you may be thinking, how does this relate to actual Dendro characters, but just hear me out. Unlike Hilichurl Grenadiers and shooters who simply apply elemental statuses on their attacks, Samaturl abilities are rooted in their element's identities. Anemo Samaturals create 3 small tornadoes that pull you in, similar to how Anemo Traveler, Sucrose, and Venti have abilities that group up enemies. Geo Samaturals create pillars which are considered Geo constructs, much like the ones created by Geo Traveler, Zhongli, Albedo, and Ningguang. Hydro Samaturals create a healing zone, and although Barbara is the only Hydro character that can heal, she is the game's only dedicated healing character. Furthermore, the Soothing Water Hydro Resonance increases all healing by 30%. The Cryo Samatural is a reskin of the Geo one, so I'm just going to pretend that he doesn't exist. And there are no Pyro or Electro Samaturals in the game. So now finally getting to the Dendro Samatural, his ability is to create 3 thorny vines that are destroyed with the burning reaction. He can also create this field which applies Dendro for potential burning, but it's pretty insignificant. I don't think Dendro will be focused on creating structures, since that steps a bit too much into Geo territory. Instead, I got the impression that the theme is crowd control, which isn't focused on pure upfront damage. This is further evidenced by Dendro Slimes, which can make a poison cloud that forces you to move out or get hurt. Keeping this idea in mind, I've come up with 3 mechanics for potential Dendro characters, and I will be visualizing my ideas through beautifully handcrafted MS Paint animations. The first is an adaptation of the Dendro Samatural's ability that is more suited for a playable character. Since this one is also the most basic, we'll say it's for the Dendro Traveler. The elemental skill will create a small thorny bush that hits any enemies that get too close to it, dealing Dendro damage, applying the Dendro element, knocking the enemy back, and generating Dendro energy particles. Of course, larger enemies would not be able to be knocked back. To make it more natural to play around, your basic attacks will be able to reach past the bush and you can jump over it if you want to. Since elemental bursts tend to be large area of effect attacks, I think it would be fitting to have the Traveler send out a wave of thorny roots. Any enemy hit would take Dendro damage and be inflicted with the rooted status. What makes this form of immobilization different from freeze and petrify is that enemies will still be able to attack, just not move. Next up we have Baizhu, the only real confirmed Dendro character that we know about. He showed up during the Archon quest in Chapter 1 Act 2, and we can clearly see that he has a Dendro vision on his waist. We don't know much about his character other than the fact that he is Chi-Chi's caretaker, that he is a doctor who makes very bitter but effective medicine, and that he's in the pursuit of eternal life. If we use his medicine as a base idea for his kit, maybe he could be someone centered around choosing to heal or do damage similar to Moira from Overwatch. According to Herbalist Gui, the pharmacist at the Boo Boo Pharmacy, Baizhu has a weak body. This would probably make him a catalyst user, since catalysts are the only weapon that aren't physically carried. And of course, I cannot ignore Baizhu's white snake companion, Changsheng. Based on our other 2 characters who have their own familiars, Baizhu's elemental skill would probably have Changsheng become a turret which periodically deals AoE Dendro damage. If the skill is recast while Changsheng is active, she targets the player character and heals them instead. His elemental burst would empower Changsheng, allowing her to do even more damage and healing but at the same time. I think an interesting idea for this would be to have her produce poisonous clouds which deal rapid Dendro damage. What would make this different from other damage over time abilities though, would be that the damage ramps up the longer the enemy is inside the poison, similar to the badly poisoned status effect from Pokemon. My last and probably best character idea is for the Dendro Archon, the God of Wisdom. When I think of God of Wisdom, I don't imagine someone that can just run in and kill everything. I instead think of carefully planning a strategy before going into battle. An elemental skill that fits this idea is a trap that you would have multiple charges for. It would be a high risk and high reward, dealing massive amounts of damage but only when used correctly. To implement this, detonating multiple traps on an enemy simultaneously multiplies the damage dealt, but having the traps just deal Dendro damage would be pretty boring, so it would be cool if they instead exploded into minions, making the Dendro Archon a summoner type character kinda like a Sisson Mage. This would work especially well with a Shaman character thematic or something similar. To set these minions apart from Guoba and Oz, they would attract aggro from enemies but also be able to be killed. For the elemental burst, an Archon of course needs to have something big and flashy. To fit in with the previously mentioned themes, his burst would create a giant plant at the location of any traps and places where traps recently detonated. The plants would flail, dealing lots of damage, and similar to the traps, having multiple simultaneous hits would do bonus damage. The best weapon for this kit would probably be a bow, since you would be able to keep your distance from enemies, luring them towards the traps while still being able to deal damage. If they wanted to make him a full-blown solo DPS carry, they can make it so that enemies marked with charged shots take increased Dendro damage. There are a few other Dendro related things that are worth talking about. First up is the resonance for having two Dendro characters in the party. Each existing resonance targets specific basic stats. Pyro gives attack, Hydro gives healing, Electro gives energy recharge, Cryo gives crit rate, Geo buffs shielded characters, Anemo buffs stamina, movement speed, and skill cooldowns, and 4 unique elements increases resistances. That leaves the major stats of crit damage, health, and elemental mastery. Since I don't feel like Dendro would be a very offensive element like the first 4, I can't imagine it giving increased crit damage. So I think it's pretty likely that it would grant health, elemental mastery, or maybe even both. Moving on to elemental reactions, we know that it won't be like Anemo and Geo, which can only swirl and crystallize. This is because Dendro has one unique reaction in the game, being burning. Based on this, I've come up with debuffs for the other 3 elements. Dendro plus Cryo would inflict Wither, slowing enemy movement speed and attack speed while doing a small bit of damage over time. The slow would be much stronger than the one caused by Cryo alone. Dendro plus Hydro would inflict Soak, decreasing all elemental resistances but not physical. Probably around 20% or so to be on par with Zhongli's elemental skill. Last is Dendro plus Electro, causing confusion. This would cause enemies to briefly be able to deal damage to other enemies. I don't know if this would be too difficult to code in, but it's just an idea. For Anemo and Geo, I think they would do the normal swirl and crystallize reactions, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up doing something completely unique. The final things that would have to be implemented when Dendro is added is its artifacts and ascension materials. For certain, we would have a 2-set bonus that grants 15% increased Dendro damage. If Dendro's elemental reactions all actually do grant debuffs, then a 4-piece could be something like all debuffs have extended durations. For ascension materials, they need a boss that can drop gemstones and a boss material. Probably a new hypostasis or Registine, but it would be cool if it was something completely new. So that's everything I'm predicting about Dendro. Honestly, I have no idea when it will be coming, but when it eventually does, it'll be exciting. I don't mind waiting though, because longer development and testing usually means a better final product. But anyways, let me know if you're excited for Dendro and if you have any cool ideas about how it will be implemented. Also, I have to mention that the channel is extremely close to 10,000 subscribers. It actually blows my mind how far we have come in such a short amount of time. I'm so glad that you guys enjoy my videos, and I'm so grateful that you guys give me the opportunity to share something I'm passionate about. I will soon be putting up a community post where you can comment questions for me to answer in an upcoming video if you're interested. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed, and as always, thank you for watching.